What's up, fellow gamers? Phreak here. I'm the design lead of Summoner's Rift Team's live pod, and I'm here to talk about patch 25.23. Pretty typical live balance update here. Let's get into it. Brief season start update is we're going to be giving all the info about season start, and it'll be on PBE in early December, so stay tuned a few weeks for that to show up. I still think it's going to be a pretty good season. Hopefully you will like it. I think it's going to be pretty solid. We are still in sort of post-production kind of bug fixing mode. All the VFX and SFX from new mechanics are coming in. That's getting hooked up and whatnot. Going through some scripting stuff. Because I've had this in the last sprint to pay attention to details and do a lot of script cleanup. For example, this is a really minor bug, but it's one that I came across by like going through all my stuff with a fine-tooth comb. On live right now, one of Baron's attacks in Death Recap has a broken icon in Death Recap. So if you fight one of the 3 Baron variants and you die and that spell hits you, you'd be like, oh, there's a blank icon here for where like Baron's damage came from. I know it's like a really trivial bug that doesn't matter at all, but it was like, oh, I was just looking at what's going on here and I noticed, oh, interesting, there's actually a broken thing here, I'll fix that. Of course, there's more pressing bugs on live, but I've been able to do a lot of script cleanup around just things being way easier to maintain for other designers going forward, which just is a thing that doesn't immediately matter, but will like matter down the line. So I've been able to do a lot of digging in and cleaning things up and making them easy to maintain and modernizing stuff, which is something I really enjoy doing. Even though this isn't always going to matter a ton. Ultimately, yeah, I think it'll still be cool, but just wanted to give that minor update that we're a few weeks away from you guys seeing what we've all been working on. Let's talk about this patch. We have one systems change that I can recall. It's Sunfire Aegis getting a monster damage increase. I know I've seen quite a few player comments around how Sunfire feels like it's a much worse item than Hollow Radiance. I agree, Hollow Radiance feels better. Turns out N-Step made a really cool item that feels really good to use. From everything I can tell, though, Sunfire is not a weak item and is not actually weaker than Hollow Radiance. Yes, Hollow will clear waves a little bit faster because the explosion will add up damage and that'll matter long term, but Sunfire actively deals more damage, has an overall better stat profile because they're not paying for a little bit of health regen, which typically won't matter very much, but still is pricing the items a little bit here. And so I still do not believe Sunfire is a weak item for top laners. I just believe that that is true about the item. That said, it is a weak item for junglers when you compare to the other options you could go for. It's pretty clearly worse than Liandry's. The damage on Bommies is strongly better than Faded Ashes. Yes, you have the Faded Ashes kiting stuff going on that, you know, can matter quite a bit. But there's also some junglers who, like, even though they build Faded Ashes, like, don't get 100% uptime. Like, Maokai Q is too long of a cooldown to guarantee permanent uptime on that, for example. Whereas Bommies, you get, you know, full time. Regardless, though, we are buffing Sunfire Aegis because it actually does appear to be weak when you compare what champions are buying. Sunfire, you know, wins fewer games, things like that. So this will, by the way, be a moderate buff to tank junglers, even if people are building so optimally. A lot of them still buy it, and it's, you know, a decent portion of games. Even champs like a Mumu who are already getting a win rate buff from this because they already buy both. We're also buffing some tank junglers this patch, so we'll see how it all kind of comes together. But yeah, this is a needed buff. This is the one where it actually feels needed, and otherwise I think the item is mostly fine. Moving on from there, we are doing another round of jungle additions. It is not hard to make a champion win, you know, let's call half an appropriate number of their games in the jungle by just making their clear better and better and better and better and better. And this is, for example, where Zed is. I still maintain the position that we are not going to make more Zeds where they're good in jungle because their clears are incredible. They're just the fastest in the game and doesn't enough win rate. Like, Zed exists, and I think it's actually fine that it exists. I understand he's like literally the fastest champ in the game, but to a certain degree, I think it's okay. Someone has to be fastest. Yes, he's like way too fast. I kind of get that. Like, I understand the pains there, but it's the kind of thing where I think it's okay to let it sit for now. I think it's actually reasonable, personal opinion, but that's what I believe. but I'm not trying to put any more champions there. So, for example, when we did the jungle versus top lane skew stuff for Volibear, we basically brought him down from like number 7 jungle clear to like slightly faster than average. It's like, good, I was glad that we went after like early jungle mod stuff to not house so many super fast clearers. That puts a lot of pressure on early laners, gives a lot of agency to junglers, and yeah, they come into your lane level 4 before you're level 4, and it's 2v1, and they just beat you at full health. Like, yeah, that's painful. And so the more we can slow some junglers down who have the room to do it, that's going to be my preferred lever, in the way that when we have room, I'm going to nerf armor growth to make lethality a better stat. Like, there's some things that I believe will make the game better systemically that you get to do 30 of these a year when you're doing live balance, and that, like, in my mind, makes the game incrementally better year over year, and that's a good thing. So, for example, doing stuff like that. But in this case, right, where the goal is to put champions into roughly median jungle clear territory, and in some of these cases, I'm not sure these champions are going to have enough win rate. Like, they're not going to be powerful enough to be a viable jungler without going into Thanos clear. And again, the goal is not to do that. So it's like, well, so for example, I know we tried to put in Nautilus jungle, and we gave Nautilus a pretty average clear, and it's like pretty playable, and there's room for optimization. Like, I think last I looked, Nautilus's like generic win rate is around like 47%, but if you do smart things like max E first, and learn E at level 1, it's actually more like 48, and it's like, well, that's actually more games than a lot of other tank junglers already win. And I'm not going to say that Nautilus jungle is actually one of the stronger champions. It's not, but it's like, well, it's 48. It's doing better than other tanks, and it's like not that far off. And, you know, some players are failing to max W second, which is optimal for jungle and whatnot. But even then, it's like, well, if we really want to make jungle Nautilus viable, we have to go in and make him better at using gold selfishly, because jungle is clearly a higher income role than support. And that's worthy work, don't get me wrong, but we have to do that work of shifting a lot of power around and testing that, relative to just like, oh, we bumped the jungle mod and now he does a Zed clear, but he's balanced. It's like, I would rather have to wait and have to do the work and everything that goes into that than just make him clear at 308. And like, that's just, yeah, I don't want to do that, right? So, sorry that, for example, Nautilus isn't as good as he could be in the jungle, but there's things I'm holding as more important than that, and holding to that right now. So that's, by the way, why some of the stuff like doesn't have follow-up, is sometimes there isn't a room to follow up on it, and sometimes there's competing priorities and time limits and whatever, but wanted to kind of give that preamble on jungle editions. So anyway, why are we doing jungle editions? So there's basically two really big topics here, or sort of reasons why. Number one is we know very clearly, obviously true, that your familiarity with a champion directly correlates, and I would say is very causal to your win rate on a champion. It's really, really obvious. Every champ showcases this. Some don't take that many games, only 15 to 20. Some take hundreds. But regardless of literally every champion in the game, your familiarity on the champion affects your win rate on the champion. Shocking, I know. But this means that, well, autofill is a thing in League of Legends, not going away. We can do things to mitigate it, and, you know, that can definitely get better, don't get me wrong, but autofill is still a thing that exists. And so the more likely you are to be able to transfer your current champion knowledge into another role, the better you're going to do in those auto-filled games. For a while, when I would get auto-filled mid, I'd play Trist mid, and I actually do pretty well. I'm pretty bad at mages. I can play Tristana. And it's like, oh, I actually like can win some lanes and get some turret plates and feel pretty good at this one. I can navigate out team fights. Yeah, I don't know how to late game side lane very well, and lane dynamics and understanding like where to ward the enemy jungler. It's like, yeah, I'm not a mid laner. I don't really have that stuff, but it's like that matters a lot and has a really big impact in your ability to win a game. And so, if you get pushed in a jungle and it's like, oh, but I'm a top lane Zac player, I've got Zac jungle, great, you're good to go. If you're a support Moo player and, you know, Moo's there, you're good to go. But, you know, you have things like Sylas, where if you're a mid laner and now you get Sylas, well, you know the champion, you're ready to go. And so the more you have that, that will do a lot in closing some of the auto-filled jungle win rate gap, right? Because you know your champion, you might be out of the role, but you're going to gain like 7% win rate by knowing your jungler instead of, you know, first timing it, right? And that can help a lot, right? It's a very big deal in closing that disparity. The other one, and this is actually, I don't know if it's a bigger force or not, but it's also there and pretty real, which is there are measurable impacts in role selection when functionally new champions come out. So when we saw, for example, Smolder and Yunara come out, they very, very strongly spiked bot lane pick rate. by, within a few months, that almost always tapers off to about the same pick rate it always had. And you're like, here's like, the like long-term best fit line of like the roll select rate of bot lane. And it like slightly goes up and to the right from last I checked. And then it like, Yunara came out and it does this and it comes back down and it's like, oh, it connects back to where the line was going. And so you have like, a few weeks or a month of like everyone, people are coming over to play bot lane for the new champion, and then it settles back down to where it would have been without that. Or maybe a little bit higher, but whatever, right? It's like, it's harder to measure, right? But, that's kind of force here, right? Smolder, similar boat, right? The AD carry is the easy one to point at because it's just really easy to look at, and the spike is really large there. A little bit more so than other roles, interestingly enough. Anyway, though, what we did see, though, with last time we injected a bunch of junglers is there was a... and I mentioned this like 2 videos ago as well. There was an obvious spike, not to the level of like a new champ coming out, but there was an obvious spike last time we injected junglers, and it actually maintained. Like, instead of doing this and coming back down and then going back to like where it was before 3 months ago, it like went up and then just kind of stayed higher. And it was like, we actually just made new jungle mates. They just moved over and said, this is my role now. Or just, people that were like on the fence, like moved over. So it's like, okay, there's actually some very real gains here. Now, my theory, and this is really just a hypothesis, it is not proven out. There's this weird irony where in some cases you have champions where their kits can feel a little bit non-functional, and it's like, they're not really very popular in their main role. If we give them a second role, they get to have a bit of a player base. That's nice. So an example here is Rek'Sai. I'm not going to say Rek'Sai is non-functional. I actually think her current kit is pretty decent in jungle. I think I made some mistakes when I did the update a while back, but I think those are mostly rectified. And now, she's better at playing the tunnel to gameplay, and she's less reliant on having to max E so that you can, like, get the tunnel network even if you're playing Qmax, even though it's not quite that good. And she actually has healing, and like, I think the kit's in a slightly better spot than it was before. At the end of the day, it's like Rek'Sai is still not that popular. And even though Rek'Sai had a lot of games at Worlds, was a really big top laner there, and we had like a small pick rate, spike for Rek'Sai, she's still nowhere near the top 15 of, top lane pick rates, despite being a very strong, like actually overpowered, seen in pro play. It's like, well, there's just not that many players for Rek'Sai. Like Rek'Sai being a top laner, though she'll remain in that role and be viable there, is not making top lane more popular. In the same way that when Sylas, who is functional and is already a popular mid laner, like top 4 pick rate last I checked, he comes in and out of being number 1, whatever. Put him in the jungle. He's also top 4 pick rate jungler, and the patch that Sylas Jungle showed up was the one where people just stayed with jungle and moved over. So it's like, well, it's nice to have unpopular champions show up more often so you can actually see them in the game, and that's kind of cool. On the other hand, making the popular champions show up in more roles actually affects the popularity of that role. And so it's like, well, I guess it means we should do both and go for unpopular and popular, but in terms of having a real impact in making the role, like, right, in terms of like serving both these goals, right, of having autofill safety, hey, Aatrox players, here's Aatrox in the jungle, I bet you already know Aatrox, he's like top 3 pick rate top laners, and then having more jungle players, here's Aatrox, he's really freaking cool, you have more cool champs in the role, maybe play the role now, like, this all just says we should do things to Sylas and Ahri and Aatrox, right, like, that's what it proves out to, although I'm still going to do it to anything that we think the kit makes sense for. So let's finally go into the changes for the junglers. And to be clear, the pass here, because so many of these champions are, I would say more than half of these are basically unplayable, to where, yes, we can get data. We can get both generically observed solo queue data and go through like months of high mastery only data, to where it's like, no, you have played a lot of games of Malphite or Aatrox or Mbessa or whatever. How good are those players doing? A combination of those measures end up being enough where it's like, okay, I have a pretty reliable read on how strong this champ actually is. Now, what I don't know is how much power is in your first clear going from terrible to functional. I don't know how much win rate that is. In a lot of cases, the only buff we gave was to first clear. Now, of course, even a flat damage value will matter on your second, third, fourth, fifth, whatever clear, but as a percentage-wise, it's a way bigger deal in the first one. There is a really good shot a lot of these changes undershoot. And we're going to be measuring and looking at it. And in about 2 weeks, a new patch's going to come out, and we're going to do what we can to update. And, we'll see where it goes. But, like, if we can make these champions functional without having to do really weird stuff for their main role, and without having to do Zed-style clears where the only reason they're good is they clear in half a second, we're going to support these as best we can. If some of these kits are illegal and it turns out that we can't support this play style, then okay, it has to go back out. A story I was told by Nstep, who worked on Wild Rift for several years as a designer, said that they had made Fizz jungle in Wild Rift. It was his most popular role. It was also the most banned champion in the game until they removed it. Um, but that there were considerations around Fizz that might not be true for League PC. For example, the fact that if you're playing on a phone screen, Fizz ult shoots from off screen, and your minimap's harder to see. Your thumbs might be in the way, and you're very frequently locked camera, and so your like knowledge of vision is a lot lower. Well, Fizz Shark might come up from off screen on League PC as well, but people's map awareness is a lot higher. But he's like, hey, by the way, we had to remove this in Wild Rift. Okay, good to know. Thanks for the context. So we'll see. For example, right, some of these might not work. Jace might just not work. But I basically try to push these champions all to have roughly average clears. We'll see how they all land. Let's finally talk about the changes. So Aatrox is getting plus 40 to every single hit of Q. This does multiply on Sweet Spot, and it multiplies on hit 2 and 3. So yeah, this is going to make the clears pretty good. It's awkward. It's very hard to get Q1 Sweet Spot unless you're walking to the camp. Q2 is a little awkward as well. Q3 is pretty much a freebie. I forgot to mention, actually, there's another line here, which is Aatrox's passive also has the damage cap now level scales. It doesn't level scale all that sharply. I mean, it does because it more than triples, but essentially there's two ways to think about a target max HP cap for any percent health damage. One is just what's the damage number? Fair enough, sure. The other is what health am I capping at? And I never like when an ability caps at a lower and lower and lower amount of health, because it makes the ability actually kind of fall off the way that other abilities will gain damage. One just remains flat, and that feels kind of weird. So a lot of these cases I stretched them out and made sure that the level 18 health value you could target was higher than level 1 health value you could target. Just a minor thing, but I wanted to kind of bring that one up. Oh yeah, so via the passive and the Q, and by the way, the Q sweet spot refill mechanics all work on monsters as well. There's a lot of tools here for the kit kind of working functionally, and so to me, this should make Aatrox have a pretty reasonable clear. Of course, anybody who's going to do a YouTube clear is going to show you a 310 or something, maybe something faster than that. But that's not going to be what the normal person does. And if we overshoot, we have to pull things back. That's fine. We're going to patch in 2 weeks, right? It's it's not the end of the world if we get things off by a couple percent win rate. Mbessa already has a jungle mod, and in fact, the data had come in from the very start. I kind of knew since month 1, Mbessa jungle has almost the same, I will say, win rate as power level, has almost the same power level as Mbessa top lane. Now, per win rate, you might say that Mbessa top lane is a more functional champion. I could buy that. I'm not going to say that's not really true. But in terms of just looking at data, Mbessa jungle is only slightly weaker than Mbessa top, which is a very good champion already, right? And so her Q already has a mod. It's per hit, that's 25 more damage. This does not care about caps or sweet spots here. Just everything hit takes 25 more damage, or sorry, 125 more. This is now 150 more. Makes the clear a little bit easier. The nice thing is, because it doesn't multiply through all the other effects, this makes it actually very easy to, it makes you less reliant on optimizing sweet spots, which I think is generally a good thing, especially because this is going to be a lot of people's first time playing jungle and Mbessa. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. Next one is Cho'Gath E, trying again to push Cho'Gath up toward viability. This champion is not that far off. There's only so much room you have in the first clear as well. That said, I think this kit is a very functional jungle kit. Obviously wants to feast epic monsters. Ganking with Q is pretty reasonable, all things considered. And so the primary point here is just reshaping the max health cap on the E, which already, functionally betrayed, because it was a max health cap of always 200, and so you would get damage via stacks and damage via ranking it up, and the cap was still 200, and so you would pretty quickly reach that cap. And so I said, okay, you know what, instead, it's just going to do 80/110, 140, 170, 200 as the bonus damage to monsters instead of the max health damage. I just set it to that number if you're a monster. This means you kill raptors really, really, really fast. It is pretty similar against things like red and blue buff in the early game, but you do max E first, and 30 damage per rank here, level 4, 5, 7, and 9, is going to easily outstrip the rate at which those things gain to health. And then once you're at rank 5, guess what? It only ever did 200 damage anyway, so it's at, as good or only strictly better. So it is a meaningful clear speed increase for Cho'Gath, and not much else to say. I don't think he needs all that much. This will make his clear pretty fast, and yeah, we'll see how it goes. Fizz, meanwhile, felt pretty non-functional here. That first clear was pretty bad. Keep in mind, jungle monsters have pretty low attack speeds and high attack damages, and so reducing damage by 4 was not cutting it for Fizz passive. You could do the clear, but you would get pretty close to dead fighting Krugs, which, if you do a red Krugs clear, for example, kind of sucked. And so I did the changes here. Juiced his passive by 10 flat damage reduction. Also juiced both sort of halves of the active. It's the big poke and the on hit effects afterwards. All just do a flat 60 bonus damage to monsters. This is enough to make his first clear look good. Keep in mind, Fizz buys a lot of AP. He was actually in our playtest this morning. The jungler's doing, or yesterday I think. Jungler's doing really well on him, and got ahead enough where he just had enough items where the E would one-shot small raptors with no mods on it. Just has enough damage to just chunk those and get rid of them as one cast. And so, like, E doesn't really seem to need mods very strongly. W's there to finish at your single target, but your E covers a lot of stuff otherwise. Keep in mind, like, even with Wolves, there's not that much to go on AoE-wise, so this should be pretty meaningful. It should get his first clear in a pretty good spot here. And I think it'll be a pretty fun kit. I think he has a pretty fun pattern for ganking. You can E over some skill shots to, block the Leona E trying to hit you, or the Lux Bind or whatever. Some pretty fun stuff there as far as I'm concerned, so see how it goes. And Jace, pretty minor stuff. Both Qs are getting 50 bonus damage here. This does get multiplied through Acceleration Gate, so you get 70 bonus damage on Acceleration Gate Shock Blasts. This puts his clear around the average as well. Jace is one where I'm pretty sure the amount of power he needs to be a functional jungler is far beyond what we can give him here. And so I think this one's probably not going to work, and we may just have to revert the changes and, remove the extra, complexity and text on the tooltip, because why have it if it does nothing? Really entertain this one a bit more if there's a real player base for this. If we get another Silas and people really want to play it, then we will think about how to maintain this, but I think it's of the options here, the biggest long shot. Malphite needs a fair bit here. We know that most people who are going to play Malphite jungler are probably going to play AP Malphite. That's currently already true. Tank Malphite appears to win more games. The boost here is W deals double damage to monsters. This is one where, as I think his functional build is going to be tank. As a tank, he needs a way to keep up with the fact that monsters gain a lot of health over time. Yes, him having a lot of armor via his passive and W ranks is going to do a lot for pet DPS, but single target is still going to be a bit weak for a tank here. It doesn't have things like the 0 cooldown Sejuani passive where you can really chunk through red and blue. So I went for something that did scale through the game because I think he really needs it to keep up when doing his most functional build down there. Sunfire Cape help, Sunfire Aegis buff will help here as well. This gets his first clear to a pretty good spot where it feels pretty comfortable. There is an optimization here, by the way, which is W's cooldown starts when you press the button. The duration starts when you attack, and so your red or blue starts like, I forget, it's like 4 or 5 seconds early. You want to start the cooldown early so you can get like a second throughput on it while you're still in your first camp. So hey, by the way, there pretty much is like press W on cooldown. Don't worry about getting resets. Play it for getting the uptime there overall, because the cone damage, which goes through single target as well, is what's getting amplified, not the basic attack damage itself. Ornn already has some monster caps here, so going to go onto them. I think this actually, even though the numbers are pretty good here, this probably does not quite put him into a good enough spot for his first clear to feel great. It's okay. And I think Ornn is another one where he needs a lot of win rate, but also his first clear feels pretty terrible. So keep in mind that W's active is max health damage, and it has a minimum against minions and everything. That was not exposed in the level up tooltip. That has been added. That's the tooltip improvement here. And there's a max damage, which is to monsters, and I also put that in level tooltip. Both those were in the shift tooltip if you look at the rules underneath, but add some extra information here. But essentially, W2, which is the damage when you bonk someone who's already brittle, is basically the W passive, essentially. And the only way to reliably trigger that on a junk monster is press W, then attack them. And so really, W, the entire spell, goes from doing 405 damage to doing 520 damage. And then at rank 5 of the spell, which is only level 9, it goes from doing 505 damage to doing 1,000 damage. And so he's going to have much better looking clears in the mid to late game. Now keep in mind, you still have to hit somebody with, actually, consider it does like, yeah, it does like 20%, close to 20% max HP. And so you're looking at, yeah, you're getting close to the cap actually on, your 5th clear or whatever when you're level 9. So you're going to mostly get this number automatically at the cap against red and blue. This also means, by the way, if his clear ends up still being really bad and it's 325 or something and we have room for more, there's actually a lot of room to boost his number higher without it feeling like his clear is really incredible and really stupid. And also the nice thing is, because W by definition takes a while, then the auto attack is he doesn't have this like 800 damage burst chunk where you can like secure objectives out from under other people. So I think there is a lot of room to boost this if we need to, and so we'll keep an eye out and see if this is going to be playable. Riven, flat 50 damage increase on the passive. Riven is another one who's going to have an optimization of you should press Q a bunch before the first camp spawns and get your 3 stacks, and then right click, use your Qs. This is going to be one where there is going to be a ton of room for optimization, and generic measurements are not going to cut it here for Riven, both in terms of her functional PvP power, but also even her clear itself. That said, for me, a pleb where I'm like, look, I'm going to demo clear like a regular idiot would do and just be like, red buff spawn, press Q. That clear is now comfortable. If you are good at Riven, you're going to have one of the faster clears, but it's not going to be Zed. And we'll see where this goes, but ultimately I'm sort of targeting like your typical fairly skilled player who's moderately trying to optimize but not pulling out all the tricks here and like kiting camps perfectly or whatever. I'm targeting average for that section of players. That's most of our players. And yeah, this should put Riven at, functional there, but yeah, she's gonna have a lot of room for optimization. She's also really bad at the jungle right now, so we'll see what happens afterwards. But another one that could be really good and could be the next Silas, where we know Riven is a pretty popular champion and has some real diehard players, so we'll see what happens. Final one is Sion, who, much like Ambessa, we know is already in a pretty good spot here and looks to be quite playable. And so we're doing basically, here's a nudge. Based on win rate data, can sustain about a 1% win rate bump. We wouldn't really want to go any higher. It's like, well, he's already got a jungle mod. Let's just juice it a little bit higher. Let's see how it goes. Go do, fun things with your clear. Enjoy that. Should be decent overall. We'll see if people want to stick to it. If they don't, okay, fine. But putting him in. Next up, we are doing a slew of changes to AD carries. It's 4 nerfs and 5 buffs to basically shake up what you're seeing in solo queue. Basically just went after the 4 highest pick rate AD carries. Kai'Sa, by the way, 25% pick rate in most ranks, like really just the most played champion league right now. And so doing it as a shakeup, right, moving win rates around by about 1%. We know that most AD carries are relatively balanced against one another. Plus or minus 1% either way is not going to change that very much. I know some people said like that's kind of a nothing patch for like the AD carries, but you will see like meaningful movements in pick rate in both directions here. Jhin is actually a bit weak. MF is actually a bit weak. And like regardless of having goals around shaking up the ADC meta, these champs actually should be buffed no matter what. But otherwise, mostly just trying to cycle things around and just have a little bit of a different look for the season. That's one of the weird things of having I would still say pretty well-balanced game, is if you can play what you want, you end up playing well for AD carries, attractive women for the most part, is what it seems to be. And, here's Kai'Sa with a quarter of the pick rate of the game, and it's like, yeah, that tracks. So regardless, this is a shakeup here. As far as the direction of the changes themselves, there is an eye toward caster AD carry versus non-caster AD carries, trying to nudge the ones who have strong auto attack synergy toward building auto attack items. So like Ashe is already building, because she's like clearly not a spellcaster. Volley is not enough to carry this one. Ashe is already building like very high attack speed overall already, with going Kraken Slayer PD as her most common build here. And it's not that every champ should go Kraken Slayer PD by any means, but we're generally trying to play up the attack speed appetite relative to the attack damage or spellcasting or lethality appetite if you're an auto attacker. And so Ashe just lowering some Q attack speed to continue to give room for attack speed purchases to breathe. Pretty much the place there. About 1% win rate of change in this one. Caitlyn, again, we want to make room for her playing out extended team fights. I think her headshot should be strong, don't get me wrong. But also, we're in a state where Caitlyn can literally one auto you to kill you, which, yeah, it's just simply too good. So taking up to 20% off the total AD ratio here. Keep in mind this checkpoints level 7 and 13. So it is not a nerf at all level 1 through 6. It is a light nerf at level 7. It is a bigger nerf at level 13 and onwards. A light nerf for the non-champion damage. Not a very big deal there, but it's just some amount of cleanup, essentially. And the entire point is, yeah, trying to reduce the incidence of those one-shots a little bit, but still preserving the crit ratio for now, because I don't want to go back to lethality Caitlyn, and so the headshot crit ratio and the ult crit ratio staying for now. Jinx, next one up, trying to, again, nudge away from castery stuff and make sure the auto attacks are more the forefront of what she's doing. Looking for about 1% of win rate here as well, a little bit under, which is 50 flat damage on R and 0.25 off of the bonus AD ratio. I do want to point out, by the way, one thing, which is even though the tooltip says it will do at minimum 1/10 the damage in melee range, it won't. The scaling seems to be pretty much instantaneous in that you're going to do more like, I didn't actually write down the numbers and do all the math, but you definitely deal more than 1/10 the damage when you like melee range the spell. Like if you just like point blank hit somebody who's full HP, you will not do 30 damage. So that part of the tooltip is fake. It's at some point I get some time, I will re-implement, like, probably I'll keep the mechanics as they are in live, and it's like, hey, your minimum damage and melee range is this number, whatever it is, and then like write that into the tooltip and then redo the math in the scripting of how it does that. At some point I'll probably get to it, but like, hey, by the way, the 1/10 thing is really, 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 really fake. It's never actually that low. Also keep in mind, the missing health damage on Jinx R does not scale. You just get that no matter what the range is. So don't be afraid to cast short range Jinx R. A lot of the damage you're going to get no matter what range you're shooting at. Just by the way. Kai'Sa, minor nerf here, 2 armor and 10 seconds on the ultimate cooldown. A light nerf here, as she's, again, we're looking to make a bit more room for other AD carries to get picked. Moving on. Misfortune, the first buff here, is a 5% total AD ratio increase on the R. Keep in mind, MFR is only a total AD ratio. This is about, what, 1/7, about 14% more damage to the entire ultimate. That is... No, that can't be right. That's not the math. Sorry. About 1/14 more damage. 7%. There we go. More damage to the entire spell. That is a pretty big deal, right? Your entire ult doing 7% more damage is not a trivial change there. So that's something. It'll be a win rate bump. And yeah, we figured Peter's Nautilus didn't die fast enough at World, so we want to make sure that dies faster next time. Next up is Tristana, going for 1% of win rate. AD growth means she has more AD to have room for attack speed. Minor thing there, but again, we have room for buffs, so let's go give buffs. Right now, there is plenty of room before Tristana mid takes back over. Stat growth can be scary, of course, for Tristana mid going back and taking over, but we're not there right now. We have some room, and honestly, I would not mind if, like, I think it's cool if we get AD carry mids to the place where we kind of got Mel to, where it's like, these champions start entering the pool around game 3, 4, or 5 of Fearless. That's where I would want AD carries to be, where they are viable. You can play AD carry mid options, but I really never want them to be the best thing to play. Just in the same sense that I want Ziggs to be the best thing to play in pro either, where it's like, if the best thing you can do in bot lane is play a mage, that looks really bad for bot lane. The best thing you can do in mid is play an invader, right? An AD carry, that looks bad for mid lane, right? All those things are you know, going to be like bad looks if they're true. And so we have room to get Tristana up to, can play some mid games in pro and can be a challenger mid lane or whatever. Right now she's basically not, and so like a nudge here is fine, but if we go too hard and she becomes number 1, we've got to start correcting again. Next one is a nerf to Xayah's auto attacking. The total AD ratio on the pass through of her passive feathers going up by a flat 5% total AD. Is a little bit of wave flare, a little bit of team fight damage output. It's some power here. Last time we did auto attack stuff to Xayah, it ended up being pretty impactful. It was one of the first changes I ever did, was buff her base attack speed and AS ratio to make her a better auto attacker. I think it was still a pretty good change, and so here's someone else doing changes to Xayah and making her auto attacks better, which I think is pretty good. And then going back on a nerf from a long time ago on Zeri. Zeri is definitely in a spot now where her win rates are, I mean, they're essentially fine. She wins a totally normal number of games, but does not have the player base she used to. And the thought I have here is I think we should try to go back on as many of the old pros Q changes as we can. The idea being like, look, when a bunch of changes were made to be like, get Zeri out of pro and save her win rate, the people who did that work, which wasn't me, the people who did that work were successful in achieving their goals, right? They got Zeri's win rate to a great spot where she's completely viable and is not pro'd in any way. It's like, cool, well, let's go meet back somewhere in the middle where she has a balance to, even if she has a slightly low win rate, it's fine, but fulfills the speed demon fantasy a little bit better and goes back to being one of the best things you can play if you're one of the best players in the game, because Fearless does a lot for making things not look stale. I am still of the personal opinion that outside of things being literally permabanned, and the only thing you see is red team, red 1 bans this year, which very unfortunate here for Worlds. But if you're not seeing that constantly, you're just saying, oh, it's Keria, so it's Bard. But otherwise, it's just like, well, no, BDD and Faker are both really good at Azir, and so that's illegal, and they're not giving up 1 game. Okay. But so anyway, yeah. Getting Zeri to a spot where it's like, yeah, she's probably one of the best 480 carries, but like, you let her get picked in game 1 or 2. Cool, great, bring her back. I think that's fine. So right, moving back in those directions, right, going for changes that we think people will be excited about and trying to re-fulfill that fantasy and yeah, meet somewhere back, somewhere in the middle between where we were and where we are now. A bunch of adjustments and buffs here. So Fizz, this will end up being, I am pretty confident, power positive. We have the other changes that were on monster mods. Those were done on their own for monster mods. We also want to make some adjustments to Fizz to continue to push him toward being a better, self-sufficient 1v1 mid laner. I think there is still more work to do, don't get me wrong. But for now, it's like, hey, let's see what we can nudge up here and try to make him feel better about his lane matchups. And so +4 base armor. The vast majority of mid laners right now are magic damage. I think if you look at the top like 15 most picked mid laners, I think like 3 or 4 are AD, the other 11 or 12 are magic damage. That said, when you land against Orianna, she's still going to right click you for all your last hits. And so the 4 armor still matters some in those cases. Of course, it's still strictly power positive. And so we're doing a light compensation nerf to the R. I'm a big fan of continuing to nerf ult cooldowns. I think it's just the game is better when there's more variance in cooldowns being up and down, and maybe you don't know, maybe they're bluffing, maybe the game was too high paced for them, and they don't have their ult trap that fights. Like that looks like a better game overall and is richer. And so anywhere we can get away with nerfing ults, like if it's not required for your champ to be functional, I think Master Yi is an example here where the ult's kind of required to be functional. Twitch, once you're mid game, probably this boat as well. But outside of the case, it's like, no, if you can just like have a kit that works and you can like do stuff, let's see if we can, tap these down a little bit here. I think that is actually pretty defensible. And again, let's give the champs the tools to have a kit that works when your ult's not up. So moving this direction with Fizz. Okay, great. Again, expect this to be win rate positive. Dr. Mundo, Champ's team is doing a bug fix. I think they do a bug bash every roughly Friday. So at lunch on Monday, one of the champ was like, hey, by the way, I'm doing a Mundo bug fix. The math is done under the hood incorrectly in scripting. Probably has the entire time. I don't know why someone screwed this up, like on purpose later on. But essentially, you're getting the max damage on the E active when Mundo's at 70% current health, not 70% missing health. And so he's doing a lot more damage on his E active at pretty much any point in time in the vast majority of situations. If he's missing 1 HP and not below 1/3, he was always doing more damage with the spell. And it's like, well, how impactful is that? I'm not 100% sure, but it's impactful. And so went for a pretty meaningful compensation buff. We've used this lever a lot. It's an easy lever to use. We have a lot of data on it over the last 2 years because we keep pulling it. We know how much this matters. Even though it looks like 0.4 max HP is bonus AD, it looks really small. This ends up being a very, very impactful lever. It's going to be about 100% win rate by itself. And of course, if we get it wrong, we can always rebuff or re-nerf or whatever. Dr. Mundo, we think he's roughly balanced right now. The goal is fair compensation. If we get it wrong, okay. We might get off by a lot, or we fix it in 2 weeks. Mel doing an adjustment here. I actually think this will probably end up being win rate positive. We'll see though, of course. This is trying to tap down some more frustrating elements of Mel. This is not all of them. We still actually want to do more work here. Yeah, we want to do more work here. Like, let me be clear. But as part of reactive balance, I was like, hey, I have some stuff I can do for Mel here. We'd like to lower frustration. Ban rate is rising. We buffed her a little while ago. She got into worlds. That was great. Mission successful. We buffed her about the right amount to be pro viable. That's cool. But of course, the ban rate is very, very high. That's obviously a little bit scary here. It's climbing, which is not great as well. Whereas, like, yeah, that's not great. So it's like, okay, well, I've been thinking about Mel some. I have some pretty easy levers we can pull. That's not going to be like really require like heavy testing rigor. Like, this would be useful and we can shift power around. And so nerfing the E route by 0.05 to 0.05 to 0.65 seconds. We know that Emax is pretty much correct. The numbers in that skill are kind of frankly ridiculous on the rank up there. I'm not surprised Emax is correct here. But there's only so much power I'm willing to pull in a single patch on 2 days of notice. So pulling down one lever, pulling up another in rough equal trade. So a meaningful, direction to her CC. She's already very safe, has really good range, really good reliability, like doesn't need a super good CC here, of course. And then being like, look, I think the boost to the passive was pretty successful last time. When I used it as the buffs, it didn't really change her frustration or ban rate very much, but it gave her meaningful power, especially towards higher elos. Faker's playing it, best player in the world. Okay, best player of all time. Arguably best player in the world. Still currently, whatever, regardless, like, Champ's good, right? B2D had a great game on it as well, despite his team inting, but, they still won. So it's like, yeah, Champ is viable, right? So it's like, cool. Like, it's nice to see the signal that, like, stuff that, like, I get to do and, like, stuff that I implemented is like, oh, my idea is to buff a Mel passive. And it's like, oh, cool, it worked. That looks great. It's, like, fun to get that sort of direct feedback from seeing players pilot the changes that I got to put in. Like, that feels really good. It's really gratifying. So that was kind of fun to have that happen. Regardless, the point here is we are buffing Mel. And Sorry, my brain just like AFK to me for a second. Okay, yeah. So we're buffing Mel. Or sorry, we're going for an adjustment on Mel that is probably power positive. Sorry, my brain just like flew out of my brain for a second, out of my head. So going back to the buff the passive, because that tends to make her have to play shorter range, more committed, open to counterattack, and also just the actual throughput on this passive just isn't very high. The numbers now get pretty incredible. If you are level 18 and cast a bunch of spells, it's like 450 base damage. But again, you're still right-clicking as a mage, and guess what Lichbane does? About that much damage on a lower cooldown. So I don't think it's actually even very illegal here. Regardless, yeah, a trade of power I think will probably end up being win rate positive, but should hopefully do some damage restoration down. And again, we know our work is not done here, but this should at least have an impact. Next is a strict buff here, buffing the multi-hit on REW to make it better in the 1v1 cases where either you auto-attack for a lane trade or lane E, or to somebody's isolated in a side lane, or you catch them in the river or whatever. So making Ari a better assassin to try to push her up there. She is just generically weak right now, has room for strict power. So here we go, power to increase the assassin power of this champion. Skarner, we just heavily undershot on our changes last patch. That's our bad. So of course we're back 2 weeks later, like, hey, the champion's over nerfed, let's go. So +1 AD growth. This is putting Skarner at basically normal high-end Juggernaut AD growth, with further bumps the value of things like Sterix Gauge and just the total throughput of something like Titanic Hydra, or the throughput, well, not exactly the throughput, well, I guess technically, of Overlord's Bloodmail, since Bloodmail cares about your total AD when it has a second passive. So some stuff there for just making those things work a bit better and just fit the Juggernaut stat profile that I would like to move things toward. Dropping 1 second off, which is a buff, right? Lower cooldown of rank 5 of the Q. We got the numbers really good, I think, for the first clear. The first clear feels pretty similar. But late game, not getting to throw 2 Qs, you know, back to back, because you almost certainly started it early. Okay, cut it down by another second. It's now a 3-second cooldown after effect. This should give Skarner a better overall repeatable pattern here and feel good about it. And then another 1% max HP on either the Q3 auto attack or the boulder throw, going from 8% to 9% target max HP. It's not his, it's target's max HP. So a bunch of damage increases to make him more threatening, because we got rid of throwing 2 rocks at once. And so giving him that damage back, because all we really did was lower uptime and lower damage here. So trying to give that back in ways that feel good for him. We're still a little bit away from like full Juggernaut working great. Part of his win rate loss is people trying Conqueror. Conqueror is just not good enough on him. He doesn't attack fast enough. Like, he can't really build the stacks very well. And so even though he has like pretty decent AD ratios, keep in mind your E pin is never going to have Conqueror going if you're going to lead with it. A lot of your damage comes from your passive. A lot of your damage comes from, you know, the max health damage on Q. We could give Q3 an AD ratio. That's definitely a possibility. It could be added to the list here, but ultimately, even though he has like honestly some pretty good AD ratios, Conqueror just does not really work on the champion. That's siphoning some win rate, even accounting for that. He's not stronger. Again, he's still weaker than he was last patch. So going for pretty hefty buffs. We're looking for over 2% here because he lost over 1% last patch. So trying to really swing heavily here. We'll see in 2 weeks if we have to go for any more here, but trying to get him back to viability, and it'd be cool to again see that Juggernaut alt build. Swain, his primary audience is in support. He is definitively weak in that role. The win rates look really good in mid and bot lane already, which is always a rough spot to be in, but they're not crushing in pick rate or banner right now, so we have room to sit at even higher win rates right now in mid and bot. Minus 10 mana cost on the E, plus 10 damage on the E. It's kind of his support's primary tool. We are trying to support skew these changes. Yeah, simple buff there to Swain. Zehen is getting added to the game. Enjoy playing Zehen. I think he's a cool champion. A couple of nerfs here, and then that'll be the patch. So Hui nerfing his QE damage. The rank up damage is really incredible. It's already minion modded, but this thing still kind of just one-shots waves. And so going pretty heavily against the rank up damage here. Split equally on the rank up between the hit damage and the dot, and then buffing the AP ratio on the dot. This is basically, I was really committed to dropping the total damage here by, 70 like this. I think it was worthwhile. Like, it was the correct choice. But the expected win rate mag of that change was higher than the nerf we wanted to put for Hui overall. And so compensation buff the AP ratio. Now, again, this requires 700 AP to counteract. This is clearly win rate negative in any reasonable game of League of Legends. But it's going to be most felt at level 9, level 7 or so when you're, really spamming wave clear, and is going to be less relevant later on when you would have got it kind of no matter what. And other champs have really good wave clear regardless, and gives us some team fight power to, QE in a team fight down time, later on down the line. There we go. Nico getting a change where she will transform back into Nico if she takes tower damage. Right now, if you CC Nico, she goes back to her normal self. And now we're adding tower damage to that logic as well. So she can tank one turret shot as a cannon minion. That will, if I recall correctly, stop turrets from overheating, things like that. But we are going in this direction and saying, well, you get to tank one shot. Isn't that cool? I will say, actually, and this is me telling on myself, I personally didn't mind this mechanic. Now, virtually everyone else around me was like, we should change this. And I'm like, that's fine. I'm not going to, I'm not going to veto this. But I was like, I think it's kind of cute that Nico can do fun things like this. She has positives and negatives. She takes bonus damage from consume, things like that if she's a minion. But regardless, very reasonable, I think, to be like, no. Again, it's sensible. I understand it. And yeah, she will transform into a champion again when she takes tower damage. So no more infinite taking a tower for you. Rek'Sai is getting a top lane focused nerf. Now, both Rek'Sai top and Rek'Sai jungle are a little bit overperformant right now. Their win rates are quite high for skilled players. Top lane, though, is the one that is a little more overtaking. I would not mind Rek'Sai still being around as a viable pick in pro, but we're seeing, game one of finals is immediately slam the Rek'Sai. It's like, well, okay, she's maybe the best top laner of the game, and the data certainly supports that as well. So going for a very sharp top lane skewed nerf here, gaining 20% less fury on minion hits should be somewhat impactful here, as well as the amount of sustain you're getting in the early game drop by about 10% as well. Keep in mind it's linear, so it's 10% less at level 1, and then it's more like 8%, then 7%, then 6%, then 5% less pretty quickly on, but it is going to impact her early laning overall. We're talking about minus 1% top lane. If this does almost nothing, we will revisit this well and go even farther, but going to be the goal here. We will do what we can. There's even a world where we delete Fury gain on minions entirely. I think that is not entirely unreasonable, and make Rek'Sai have to trade against a champion to gain this. I think that's actually fine. Hero doesn't gain on plants and wards. I think it's okay to be like champs and monsters, and then nothing. I think is not terrible. Regardless, we know a little bit of max HP damage is going to, or damage to the max HP healing of the passive is going to have some effect in jungle, because even at level 17, there's still a small impact here. But again, jungle Rek'Sai is statistically a little bit overpowered, so can't sustain a small nerf there, and it's fine. Finally, Vladimir, this continues on our trend of which ranged top laners are doing really well after the Doran Shield second wind nerfs that we did for mid lane. And Vladimir's on the list. Vladimir is, one of the winningest top laners in the game. We didn't see a big spike in pick and ban rate, but his win rate went up, and it's like we said we're going to follow through. We're going to follow through. Vladimir losing stats that we hope are going to be top lane skewed. As I mentioned earlier, something like only 20% of the 15 most popular mid laners are AD, so Vlad's not going to feel the minus armor very much in mid lane. He'll feel it more in top lane, where the Quinn or Jace or whatever, I don't pick the ranged ones who can actually attack him, but anyone who runs quickly, you can stride breaker him at least if you're Garen and get some damage, then he pulls your Q. I understand it's not going to be very functional, but still doing a little bit there. So armor, the primary nerf, 7 health off as well, is a bit of clean numbers. Not much else to say. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye-bye.